The rain didn't just fall that night. It lashed the asphalt, trying to wash clean a city that refused to be scrubbed. I stood in the mud, my Italian shoes ruined, staring down into a rectangular hole in the sodden earth. The stench of rotten chrysanthemums and overturned soil hung heavy in the air, mixing with the cheap smoke of my cigarette. There was no body, just the dark void of an open grave, mocking the sanctity of death. There, under the weak glow of a blown-out street lamp, the case began. Not with a scream, but with a deafening silence rising from 6 feet under. The title in my file was simple, hammered out on the old typewriter that hissed with every keystroke. Case 771, the case that started with an empty grave. The author of this little urban tragedy is me, the man who sweeps up the dirt the police pretend not to see. It was November 14th, a Tuesday that felt like Friday the 13th. The address was Saint Jude Cemetery, the East Wing, where the rich pretend to sleep in peace. But that night, no one was sleeping. It all started 6 hours earlier when my office door opened. She didn't knock. Desperate people never knock. Her name was Eleanor Brooks, a woman who looked like she'd been hand-drawn to cause trouble. She wore a black mourning dress that cost more than my car, and her eyes held that kind of icy panic you only see in cornered animals or guilty souls about to be caught. She placed a stack of bills on my desk, right next to the whiskey bottle. She smelled of gardenias and fear. "They buried my husband, Julian Brooks, this morning," she said, her voice trembling like a violin string about to snap. "But I got a call an hour ago. The gravedigger, he said he saw Julian walking among the tombstones. I took the money. My office door doesn't open for virtue or charity. It opens for desperation and for the note that pays the overdue rent and buys the cheap bourbon." Her price covered my curiosity and my silence. Now, back at the pit, the scene was brutal. The mahogany coffin was scratched, not on the outside by grave robbers, but on the inside. The earth around the grave was churned up in chaotic fashion. The official coppers, led by the incompetent Sergeant Maverick Rivera, had already left, laughing and calling it juvenile vandalism. They looked at the surface and saw a tasteless prank. I looked at the bottom and saw hell. There were footprints leading away from the grave, barefoot prints, dragged, heavy, disappearing into the darkness of the Bennett family mausoleum. What you are about to hear is the uncut version, the naked truth that hides beneath the social veneer of this rotten metropolis. Pay attention to the shadows. That's where I work, and that's where the dead decided to walk. I don't trust beautiful widows who cry without smudging their makeup, and Eleanor Brooks was too flawless for someone who had just discovered her dead husband had gone for a stroll. There was something about her story that didn't fit, like a puzzle piece forced in by brute strength. I went back to the office, poured 3 fingers of cheap bourbon into a dirty glass, and let the burn of the alcohol clear my mind. To understand the grift, you have to smell the rot, and that takes more than coffee. The physical evidence screamed what the police had ignored. Inside the coffin, caught on a splinter of wood where Julian's nails had clawed at the varnish, I found fabric fibers. Not the linen of a burial suit, but purple silk. The same silk from a handkerchief I saw Eleanor twisting nervously in my office. Then there was the smell. Not formaldehyde, but bitter almonds. Cyanide? No, too obvious. Tetrodotoxin, pufferfish poison, famous in folklore for creating zombies, or in forensic medicine, for simulating death with terrifying precision. I needed answers the widow wouldn't give me. I went down to the underworld to a dockside bar called the Purgatory to find Silas Morales, the gravedigger who made the call. The place smelled of sweat and betrayal. Silas was in a corner, shaking, holding a glass with both hands. "He didn't look human," Silas whispered. His eyes, they were glazed. He was looking for something, detective. He wasn't running. He was hunting. Violence in noir is a language, and that night it was spoken fluently. When I left the bar, 2 wardrobes in ill-fitting suits were waiting for me. Goons belonging to a local loan shark, Enzo Castillo. The conversation was short and painful. Between a punch to the gut and a kick to the ribs, I discovered the motive. Julian Brooks owed a fortune to Castillo. But Julian's life insurance policy was fat enough to pay the debt and leave the widow rich. The psychology of desperation is fascinating and disgusting. Eleanor didn't want to save her husband. She tried to kill him. Or rather, she tried to stage his death to fool the shark and the insurer, but she botched the dose. The plan was to dig him up later, flee with the money, and start a new life in the tropics under a fake name. But greed made her careless. She buried him alive, expecting the sedative to last, but fear and adrenaline woke Julian up early. He wasn't a monster returning from the dead. He was a desperate man, betrayed by the woman he loved, fighting for air under 6 feet of dirt. The unmasking came when I broke into the Brooks mansion. I found Julian huddled in the wine cellar, covered in grave dirt, holding a shotgun, while Eleanor tried to convince him it was all a miscalculation. The truth is never pretty. Usually it leaves you poorer, drunker, and with more enemies. There, in the gloom of that luxury cellar, I saw that the real monster didn't have dirt under its fingernails, but wore diamonds in its ears. The case closed with the dry crack of a gunshot, but not from my gun. Julian Brooks, in a final act of twisted lucidity, shot the crystal chandelier above us, plunging the room into darkness before the police arrived. He didn't shoot her. He just surrendered to exhaustion. When the light of the sirens flooded the room, it illuminated Eleanor's face. There was no regret, just the cold fury of a lost bet. I handed the poison evidence and Silas's statement to Sergeant Rivera. Eleanor left in cuffs, cursing her husband's incompetence to the very end. Analyzing the modus operandi, it was a classic crime of passion driven by modern greed. Human motivation is always repetitive: money. Eleanor used basic pharmacological knowledge and the bureaucratic blindness of the funeral system. It's ironic. In mystery literature, the living dead is a supernatural mystery. In real life, it's just a dosage error and a death certificate signed in a hurry by a doctor, probably Dr. Robert Hughes, who must have taken his cut to ask no questions. Forensic technique of the era failed, but human nature, with its fallibility and panic, revealed the truth. The legacy of this case: a new scar on my brow, left by Castillo's goons, and a check the bank will probably question. The crime was solved, the dead husband arrested for fraud, the wife for attempted murder. The city remains sick, pulsing with new betrayals every minute. Nothing has changed, except now I know that even graves can lie if the payoff is high enough. Telling you this story is like striking a match in a basement flooded with gasoline. It's quick, loud, and the darkness comes back immediately, heavier than before. I need that silence. It's in the silence that I prepare for the next move, for the next body that will wash up on the riverbank, or the next dame in distress hiding a knife in her garter. The phone is ringing now. It's 3 a.m. It could be a wrong number, or it could be the next riddle waiting around the corner whispering my name. It's never good news at this hour. For this office to stay active, and for me to remain the only one going down to check the sewers of the human soul while you sleep, you need to keep the channel running. Subscribe. Share with those who have a strong stomach. Comment your theories. I read everything between one sip and another. The night is just beginning, and the city is too big for one man to watch alone. Enough talk. Kill the lights, and close the door on your way out. I have a glass to fill and a phone to answer.